Thank you.
All right. Please be advised, we're going to record this and you treat it like a public meeting. So I think we're all set. We can do introductions.
Okay, Abriana, I'm hoping you can drive the show, but I'm seeing that on the agenda I'm starting. So let me jump in for the introductions. Abriana, maybe we can go by your screen. I'll introduce myself real quick. My name is Dale Woolridge. I'm chair for PACES. I work down here in Tucson as a physician. Today's meeting, we're going to be going over some of our bylaws and the article descriptions. And I appreciate everybody joining. Who would be next for intros?
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Woolridge. I'll just go down my line of who's here. So we'll start with Adam Rodriguez.
Hey guys, I'm Adam. I think I've met most of you, but I help Abriana with the EMSC grant. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Adam. Excellent. And then Allison Lucas.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I've also been having audio issues today. So, hi, I'm Allison Lucas. I manage the Children and Youth with Special Healthcare Needs program within the Arizona Department of Health Services and the Bureau of Women's and Children's Health.
Awesome. Thank you, Allison. Ann Stafford.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ann Stafford. I'm the CEO of the Arizona chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Thank you, Ann. Christopher Gilbert.
Yes, I'm Chris Gilbert. Sorry. I'm Chris Gilbert. I fly with PHI and I'm a pre-hospital educator coordinator with AirVac.
Thank you, Chris. Devin Swede.
Hi, everyone. I'm Devin. I'm the manager overseeing the PPEC program at the Arizona chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Thank you, Devin. Dr. Bradley.
Good afternoon. I'm Gail Bradley, Medical Director of the Bureau of EMS and Trauma System at ADHS.
Thank you. Jordana Carpenter.
This is Jordana, and I am the Vice Chair for PACES as well as the fan representative for EMSC.
Awesome. Thank you, Jordana. Dr. Zeidler.
Yeah, hi, Josh Zeidler. So I'm boarded in emergency medicine and also pediatrics. I work out at Chandler Regional Emergency Gilbert, also EMS medical director for multiple fire agencies.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Zeidler. Tony Carazino.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tony Carazino. I'm a Chief Flight Paramedic at Guardian Air Transport here in Flagstaff, and I am the Names Council representative on PACES.
Awesome. Thank you. And Shelley Bissell.
Hey everyone, I'm Shelley Bissell. I work at the Bureau of EMS and Trauma System, helping to coordinate public meetings.
Excellent. And Abriana Smith, EMS for Children Program Manager. So that is introductions. Dr. Woolridge, am I okay to proceed to action item number 2?
Please, thank you.
Okay, awesome. So for those of you that were not in attendance in the last PACES meeting, I had proposed to revise the bylaws, first starting with the membership. Just in our daily interactions as the EMS for Children program, we're out here, we're connecting with different partners that we think would be of value to this group. Originally, it demonstrated as, let's see, 38 voting members, but I just want to make clear today that I'm not attempting to add all of the members on this list. I'm just providing this as a guidance of who could be valuable to our specific committee on achieving pediatric goals for emergency services throughout the state. I have proposed that we add at least 7 to 9, but I just want to get the group's feedback if that's too large of a number, if you would want to reduce it down a little bit, or if 7 to 9 is acceptable for you today.
You might want to display the document a little bit larger.
Oh, thank you, Shelley. So I will open the floor.
And I have a comment if it's okay.
Yes, please.
Adding more stakeholders, I think I can understand the value and the benefit to the PACES organization. The concern that I expressed at the meeting and that I still have is adding more members to the board where we then struggle to have quorum to where we can't then move on to even have the meeting or move anything else forward. So I would be opposed to adding this number of people or even considering when we still struggle to have more than 7 or 8 people from the board attend meetings in the recent past to then we only meet 3 times a year for us then not to be able to have anything that's then accomplished as well.
Thank you, Tony, for that feedback. Is there anyone else?
Hey, Brianna, can you just remind us what number of members or what percentage of the membership you need to meet quorum and PACES?
Yeah, so it's 50 plus 1. So 50% of the voting members have to be present, plus an additional voting member to meet quorum. I will say in my tenure here, we've only not met quorum once, and that was solely due to not having one additional member. I have accounted for that, and I know I can't speak to it, but the people that I am recommending, specifically the ones highlighted in yellow, are I don't know the word today, but they're very reliable people that are looking to engage with our organization, and the committee. So I know they would be present. And I think in addition to that, not to open up the next section, but with proxy voting, that could also provide an alternative benefit to the quorum present. Yes, Dr. Bradley.
Yeah, so I think the quorum issue, having kind of been both internal and external to the Bureau over the last 15 years, periodically there are issues with quorum preventing you from having a meeting. And because of the way the meeting cycle falls and the way membership goes, you might have someone that's in that role right now that's very engaged, but the next person who maybe gets that position might not be as engaged. And so that can create quorum issues. I don't believe we can do proxy votes. We have not ever allowed that for any of our statutory and standing committee meetings because of some open meeting rules. Shelley can probably speak to that, but we have never done that for our other committees. We have been asked, and I do know we like to keep the committees consistent. So I don't think that proxy voting is an option, just because we want to make sure that if someone is voting, that we truly have that actual vote.
Thank you, Dr. Bradley. I do have a comment to that, but I will move over to Dr. Zeidler first because he raised his hand first.
Sorry, thank you. Hey, Ariana, can you give us a little bit of a history? I think you mentioned it the last meeting of why is this even being brought up? Why do we feel that we need additional input? And I think you had said you compared similar committees at other states. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that stuff.
Yes. So naturally, the PACES committee, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I've only been here for a short amount of time, Dr. Bradley and Shelley, but this is supposed to be the EMS for Children Advisory Council. So I have compared it to other states where I'm looking at their members and seeing what different perspectives can be brought to the table to enhance those emergency services. All of the members that we currently have contribute greatly. I just know that having a pediatric emergency care coordinator, even a trauma program manager, can provide us a little bit of different insight, especially when I bring up those different initiatives that EMS for Children has. That's why I believe it would be a good value for our committee to expand the membership, especially because we're having external people ask to come.
Thanks. And then just remind me, our meetings are open to the public and anybody can attend and speak, correct? They just cannot vote.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Dr. Ulrich, you raised your hand.
Yeah, thanks. And I think the discussion on this has been good. I really appreciate Tony's comments earlier because it can pigeonhole us if we only have quarterly related meetings and not quorum and therefore lose our productivity. All being said, the Bureau meetings do have, there's a little bit of a stick to this, that if someone does not attend on 2 consecutive meetings, then they're notified by the Bureau and or have the ability to step away from the group. I am a member of a few other organizations, Arizona ASAP one in particular, who does use the approach of having a large board to recruit active as opposed to passive participation. So I see both sides of this, as I think the discussion starting to allude to. What I do find in the years of chairing PACES is that we have a pretty broad agenda, and particularly in our outreach and our the advisory role, the education that we put together. We may put together a module on education and trauma, currently working on children with special health care needs, medical issues, child abuse related issues, car seat recommendations. It's pretty broad, and having a broad depth of active participations really lends itself to always having a few people who have particular interest in those different agenda items and different breakout events that we're having. So I see both sides of this. I see value in this, really emphasizing Tony's comments earlier is that the individual that we recruit into this role needs to be assuredly someone who wants to actively participate. So that's my 2 cents, but I see both sides to this. I have seen a large board work in a number of other scenarios, as long as, again, we're very selective on who that individual is who fills that role. And if that person steps aside, matriculating the right person as opposed to just a body is got to be a real focus going forward. So my 2 cents.
Thank you, Dr. Woolridge. I'm just going down the line. Shelley Pisley, you had your hand raised.
I'll speak to, I won't go out of order. I'll wait till the proxy bid.
Okay, thank you. Chris Gilbert, I believe you were first.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, I guess, give my opinion on looking at some of the positions that are there. And I was, prior to me changing jobs and going to a pre-hospital and flight position, was the only representative at the time from Phoenix Children's Hospital. And so I think it's worth noting that Phoenix Children's Hospital's pre-hospital team has grown significantly. So that was a program that Chris Ramos kind of started and grew, and I know he served on this committee for a very long time, and that's where he brought me to the meetings as we transitioned over. And now they have a manager over their program. They have multiple pre-hospital coordinators. I know that their trauma program manager, it was one for a long time with them opening 4 positions. I believe now they have a trauma program manager for each location, plus their primary trauma program manager. So as far as finding people to participate now, their pre-hospital team is growing, and having that input of a level 1 pediatric trauma center in the area, I think is very good. So I think you're more likely to find people because they went from a team of 1 to 2 people to now a team of 8 to 10 people. So I think there is a larger pool to draw from in the pediatric pre-hospital coordinator and trauma program role.
Thank you, Chris. Tony?
Brianna, can I just sort of ask the question of why? So I understand that, looking at other states and where they've had other programs like this and trying to mirror what their board is looking like, but I think that what would be really helpful too is to understand what we're trying to also accomplish. I know that you and I have had privately talked on the side about, like, what is our mission? What is our vision? And what are we driving towards? And then where are the stakeholders that are contributing to that? The other fear that I have is when we get a large group of getting into more of like a group think type mentality instead of looking for things that we're actually trying to identify as initiatives or the quality where we're bringing things back. So, everybody that, like, reading through your list, these look like amazing stakeholders in that, but are there things that we're going to gain from that? Or are we going to, what is the best course of action for us to see positive movement and growth within PACES and the impact on the state? Because I think that that's what you're really trying to grow is more not necessarily even ownership, but contributions and more, broader thoughts and ideas. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yes, Tony. Apologize. Some of my audio cut out a little bit for that. And I just want to reiterate for the group that I'm not trying to expand this voting membership like astronomically. Like, we can even do 3, but I don't want a group mentality. I want everyone that's on the committee to provide value, which you all do currently. But I think we can all agree that there is a gap that's needing to be addressed when it comes to children with special healthcare needs. Outside of that, connecting EMS and hospitals specifically for pediatric cases, because they're so infrequent in the field, having that pre-hospital coordinator could be of value, especially also having the trauma program coordinator from a pediatric facility. Those provide different perspectives than just a hospital that is having a few pediatric patients come in. So I'm looking for us to broaden, because I know at the national perspective, EMS for children is going to start expanding into different avenues, and trying to focus on these gaps to, make sure everyone's up to speed when it comes to pediatric emergency care. So that, I hope, answers the question. If not, please somebody speak up. I really appreciate this discussion today. Jordana?
So I just kind of want to bring to the point of the new MARC program and how we're recruiting PECs. I think it would be probably beneficial to have both an EMS and hospital PEC on the council as well, just to bring those bridges and gaps.
This is Anne. I would agree with that, right? I serve on the council as the representative from the Arizona AAP, but also from the Pediatric Prepared Emergency Care Program. And since the MARC program is really, the pre-hospital version of PPEC, to me, it really does make sense, and to have a coordinator from that program also.
Thank you. And that's really what I'm trying to do, especially for our upcoming meetings. I want everyone within our committee to just provide updates of what's going on for pediatrics in their community. So why not have those people that are engaging more frequently on these cases every day, and have a specific focus on the pediatric perspective. So again, I'm not trying to add everyone to this list, but I think the PECs would be a great option, the trauma program manager, pre-hospital coordinator, and then I know this is not emergency related, but the Department of Education representative, they have school safety preparedness specialists that are focusing on connecting pediatrics to the emergency services. And those children are in schools the majority of their day. So why would we not have that perspective on our committee as well to talk about the daily engagement of the student? So those are my top recommendations. I understand the hesitancy, but I think it can bring value. Yes, Shelley?
I know on some of the other committees, there's some confusion. When you say pre-hospital coordinator, do you mean EMS or do you mean hospital?
Person based in the hospital that's connecting with those agencies. Yes, Tony?
Ariana, do we have a mission statement or any value statement or anything else that we're supposed to be working towards? And I apologize for even being part of the committee without knowing that, but I feel like that might help to sort of guide some guidance to this as well.
Yeah, so the one that sticks out to me, thank you, Tony, for bringing that up. So our Article 1 is our purpose, right? But the one sentence that sticks out to me is to enhance the quality and effectiveness of emergency care for children and youth, including those with special healthcare needs statewide. So those of you that are in the hospital, when you're doing QI, you're looking at the EMS times and your hospital, everyone coming in times, right? So why not have more pre-hospital on our council for that? And the effectiveness, we're spreading out to over 1.6 million children throughout the state, if not more. So why are we not having some of those people come to the table as well to speak on their perspective? So that's my thought when I look at that specific sentence. Yes, Allison?
Hey, Brianna, is the SAN for EMSC always the parent of a child with complex medical needs or with special healthcare needs, or is it just any parent of a possible pediatric patient?
So for a FAN, it's a parent of a pediatric patient. However, most states have a child with medically complex needs.
Okay. And just to be totally transparent, like my reason for asking is that I obviously feel like our, like the population that my program serves is well represented on PACES at the moment with Jordana in her role. But if that person were to change, like if it were not to be Jordana and it wasn't a parent with who brought that background and understanding, I would want to make sure that that the population of kids with complex medical needs are in some ways like formally represented within the work.
Thank you, Allison, for bringing that up. Because I know we did discuss this briefly during our November meeting about some of the state representatives being voting versus non-voting. I completely respect your opinion on the Bureau of Operational Readiness and Response representatives. However, I would like to propose to the group of maybe making the Maternal and Child Health Title V representative a voting position, because they specifically focus on this patient population. Is that something we're willing to entertain? Yes, Allison?
Well, and then not to like complicate life, because I think I was maybe the one who said that should be broadly like Maternal and Child Health Title V representative, but I would say maybe one more thing to consider as we think about these roles and as we think about what we're titling them is like how specific they are. With them being broader, you have more flexibility in who plays that role. If they're more specific, you'll get more to be more prescriptive in who specifically is in that role. And again, if we're thinking about a day when none of us are here, like that the MCH Title V representative could be pretty much anyone who works under those population domains in the Bureau of Women's and Children's Health, and it wouldn't necessarily be someone who has great familiarity with the needs of children and youth with special health care needs specifically. So I didn't give you any like opinions there. I'm just kind of throwing out all the options to weigh.
No, thank you, Allison, for presenting that. So do we want sorry guys, so do we want to move this back to children and youth with special health care needs liaison? That's my only, that one. And do we want to move it back to a non-voting position or voting? That one is one that can easily be done today because it's not adding a different person onto the committee.
I think a SHIN representative, so that it is a person who is in tune with the special needs population. I think that would be very wise, because like Allison said, if I'm not the one who's there to represent that family perspective that has these different backgrounds, it could skew and kind of deter what we're doing with the children and health.
Okay.
Yeah, like I think we run the risk of just being blind to kind of show the needs of that population. So sorry, Adriana, because I do think I might have been the one who pushed you in the other direction initially, but now that we're having this conversation, I agree with Jordana. Like I think that needs to be explicit. And I can say, I mean, I'm not going to, again, I'm not going to say one way or the other, like voting, non-voting, whatever. But I do think it's good to have that called out specifically as a SHIN representative. And in the, you know, that means at this point in time, like in terms of people who exist at ADHS, you know, Dawn could be that role. I could be that role. My supervisor, who is the state SHIN, like Children with Special Health Care Needs Director for the MCH Title V block grant, could play that role. But as long as the person that's coming into that knows that they are there to represent that population.
Okay, thank you. And I propose this to the committee. Do we want to make this more of a voting role so that there's an additional family representative voice that's voting, or do we want to keep that as a non-voting role as we historically have done?
Are we looking at maybe a specific number to add? I think that might be some of the hesitation to have how many different people we're going to be bringing on as a voting member to have meet that quorum. Maybe we do a small number like 4 for now, and we can always revisit this later and add more later. But maybe starting off kind of small and just kind of putting in those like the key points of the PEC and maybe another SHIN representative, and then maybe like a children's hospital representative, I think would be a wise choice. That's just.
Thank you, Jordana. Yes, Dr. Woolridge.
Yeah, and I think I kind of maybe leaning on some of the same things that Jordana's referencing is the processing going forward. We have a number of people listed here. Are these, and I think I'm just looking at processing just from the chair perspective, as we move this forward, if there's going to be individual votes at our next PACES meeting. One of the things I see is that we have a few positions that are representatives that may be ADHS individuals. Are we specifying those are not within the ADHS as employees of the ADHS and they're external to the ADHS? For example, maternal and child health, will that be an ADHS person? The one above it, Bureau of Operational Readiness, is that also ADHS staff? And should staff members be voting members in a bureau meeting?
Thank you, Dr. Woolridge, for that point. Yes, Dr. Bradley.
Typically, we have not had staff members be voting members. That's why I'm not a voting member on PACES. So I think that is something just to kind of, again, consistency with our other committees. At the more ADHS staff we have, certainly important voices to have at the table, especially with some of the knowledge regarding regulations and things like that. But when it comes to voting purposes, that can become problematic.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I agree with 34. 35 does have a little asterisk because the person that currently serves in that role is a contractor, so they're not technically a state affiliate or an employee of the state. So they could serve as a voting role if it was specific to the contractor fulfilling that. But if we're more comfortable with keeping it consistent and doing non-voting, we'll leave that to the group. Yes, Jordana. Jordana, you had your hand raised.
Oh, sorry, my mute didn't unmute. Don't we currently have some of the positions that are on the PACES committee not filled at this time? Also,
No.
We're completely filled now.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a way, because like we're wanting participation, is there a way to kind of like re-ask the people who are on the committee now if they are interested still, if they are wanting to stay on to be active participants instead of passive participation, like so that we do have more of a involved group? Is that kind of more of what we're looking for?
I would say that it would be advantageous for EMS for children to have a little bit more different representation and perspective on some of the projects that we do. I will say all the feedback we do receive is valuable during the meetings. While I would love more, I understand that sometimes it's not in that person's specific scope. So that's where I think it would be beneficial to add just a couple more individuals that may have that expertise and knowledge, like, for example, the children and youth with special healthcare needs. But I will say, if we are comfortable with adding more, it would have to be an odd number, just because of quorum, the way that it would even out. If it was an even number, it would not be beneficial to the group. So we could even just consider 3 or 5. Yes, Dr. Zeidler?
Hey, so do we have these type of people that are regularly attending our meetings anyhow? And have any of them voiced concerns that they're either not being heard or don't have a vote?
Yes. I don't know how to better say it than yes, especially with some of the family perspective, there could be a little bit more. I know injury prevention would like to be discussed a little bit more frequently. Those are just a couple examples that come to my mind, but there are individuals that do come, they want to be engaged. It's just challenging because there's no space for them at this time.
Okay.
Brianna, do you want to highlight those with like a different color for the group to consider?
Yeah, originally, I apologize, guys. I highlighted all the ones in yellow that I thought would be of more pertinent discussion for us, and then we could invite other individuals in the future. So all the ones highlighted in yellow are the ones I think we should immediately consider. But I wanted to provide this entire list so that you could see if there's anything that you think could be beneficial to have on PACES as well. But I can do it now if that helps. So can everyone see that okay? The green.
I'm curious, like how many hospital people versus how many EMS people you're wanting.
Yeah, so the pre-hospital coordinator I count as a hospital and EMS, so that is one individual. Another one would be the EMS Pediatric Emergency Care Coordinator, so that's 2 for pre-hospital. And then the AD Pediatric Emergency Care Coordinator, that's a hospital. And then Trauma Program Manager, that's a hospital. And then the 5th one, I think we should consider either the Tribal Emergency Physician Representative or the Department of Education Representative. Those would be my top 5 or 6.
So, sorry, can you go through that again? And I'm having trouble seeing the difference in the color. So you said number 18 and 19. I got 33.
Yes. 18, 19. Thank you, Dr. Zeiler. That's way better. 33, 31, and then 25 and 23.
So that would put us at a total of 20. We would need 11 for quorum every time.
Yes.
If I may, now that we're actually talking about cropping these down a little bit, I see 20, the program manager, and oh, I'm sorry, I lost my spot. The trauma program manager, and then 23, the pediatric trauma program manager.
Yeah.
I see that as being kind of redundant. Now, again, back to a question that was asked earlier, do we have individuals out there who are actively looking to get involved that we're building the position for, or could that individual, and if so, could that individual fit into either one of them? So,
yeah.
And I also see that 18 and 19, we have our PECs there for EMS and for the pediatric emergency departments. But those PECs also champion injury prevention and traffic safety. So are those not a little bit redundant too?
Thank you, Dr. Woolridge, for bringing that point up. When I originally presented this list, that was my thoughts exactly, but I wanted to be inclusive as many people that wanted to be interested. But I completely agree that specifically even looking at 20 and 23, 23 could encompass the trauma program manager role. If we emphasize that they have to see a certain amount of pediatric patients, like from a level 1 facility or something.
And I'm sorry, I don't see any other hands up. So I'm sorry if I can extend that a little bit. And again, comment that was made earlier. There's an underlying premise that I have felt strongly about as far as the PACES committee and statewide representation, making sure we're not just filling with urban positions, that we're reaching to the rural sector. So again, when we're comparing 20 and 23, we're almost if it's a 23 as it lists, we're almost insisting that they're from a big city. Whereas if it's listed as 20, then we could get someone who is from a smaller and or more less developed area of Arizona. And always in the back of my head is how do we recruit from statewide participation, which is not just the city.
No, and I think that's a valid point. I agree with you. I haven't received specific engagement for rural areas, but that is something we are looking to expand into for EMS for children. So I would maybe say that we consider number 20 instead of 23 and just leave it as trauma program manager and leave it open.
I would ask other opinion. I don't want to just engineer the list, but
okay. Yes, Dr. Bradley.
So I think one of the challenges is recognizing someone who's expressed interest now. It's wonderful that they want to participate, but if in 3 years they aren't in that role anymore, they don't qualify for that position. If we still have that position written into our bylaws, do we have someone? So I think we can't look at who's expressed interest for specific roles as opposed to what role do we think should be on the committee. So I think expressed interest and what role we think we should have in there are two separate pieces. The other component that I have concerns about is if we get it too specific for a role, we have some positions that have been open for a decade on our other committees because they are so specific and no one wants to fill that role. And that really comes up with specific things, law enforcement, rural and tribal related. And we value those areas being kind of represented in our committees, but those are the areas we seem to have the hardest time getting representation for. So an opportunity may be to say, be a little bit more broad in the descriptors. And then certainly as applications come in, that's where we could say, listen, we don't have anyone representing a tribal or rural. We want to include them in this group. So I think I would want to be a little bit more generalized if possible.
Dr. Bradley. Yes, Tony?
Is there potentially like an at-large or some other specific title positions that could be created that could be filled with these different individuals, or does it by statute need to be specific to a region?
I'm sorry, Tony, can you ask that one more time? I apologize.
Yeah. Are there opportunities for us to create a position like at-large? So instead of it being a tribal rural EMS physician that only works XYZ or it's really specific, is there a position that could be on PACES that could be just at-large that they could then be, if we have someone who's applying, but there isn't a position where that fills that specific role, that they have that opportunity to contribute. And then if they were to fall off, they could be filled by somebody else within the state? Or does the position itself need to have a specific title, like a council or?
I'm going to defer to Shelley on that one, if that's okay.
It's like the public member on EMS council. It's just a general member when he's the at-large member.
Shelley, you're a little muffled. Was it,
Oh,
could be a potential for an at-large member?
Yeah, I think so. It's like on the EMS council, we have one called public member, which any interested party can go for.
So I guess I'd pose that question. Would it make more sense for us to create a specific number of at-large members and then try to gain recruitment from one of these positions?
Yes, but I do also think we need to have a couple that are specific, such as like the pediatric emergency care coordinators, because we are going to want them to start getting involved. They're going to make great differences in our emergency care. But I do think public members could be beneficial. To your point, Tony, if they don't fit one role, can they fit another? So I do like that idea as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Allison.
And sorry, Rihanna, I'm just going to kind of continue to advocate for, again, I think that there's an opportunity to have like a called out children and youth with special healthcare need representation here. And I think that doesn't need to be ADHS. Like, I think, again, there's plenty of folks statewide who could fill that role. I can think of any number of parents I know who have kids with complex medical needs who have also worked in, emergency services. I think some of the other statewide partners, like Raising Special Kids, or somebody could fill that role at different points in time, like depending on what was needed there. So I would say I think it's good to define some of these things like in a broad enough way that representation could come from different quarters, but that it still ensures, like I said, that kind of the specific needs of that very unique needs of that population are represented at all times.
Yeah, I thank you, Allison, for sharing that. And that's what I wanted to propose to this group for number 35 is maybe broadening it out and not having it ADHS specific, but rather a children and youth with special healthcare needs liaison in general, or another, considering it a family representative. Just for the, I don't know, I think we could use more of that in our emergency services, and just having that perspective could be helpful to all of us. And Stafford?
I feel like we're on the right track with trying to go as broad as possible. Like Allison was saying, right, we're just gonna have to wordsmith it a little bit to be, so we want somebody who's representing children and youth with special health care needs, but it could be, like Allison said, from any of those organizations. If we wanted it to be, it could be a family representative with children with special health care needs. I think we're on the right track of maybe going broader so that we can fill them with the agencies or the people that show interest, if that's what we choose, or it could be open to other representatives. So I think we're on the right track with getting broader. We just have to figure out what those categories would be.
I suggest deleting the roles that don't have highlight on them, and then we can firm it up more. And Aubriana, if you could have your displayed version go to 150%, that might be a little bit easier to see.
Apologies, I have this gigantic monitor, everyone, so I'm very sorry I did not have it. Thank you, Shelley. Okay, excellent. So I'm just, for the sake of the group, I'm going to remove this and keep for all state representation as a non-voting position. I think we can all agree on that one. And then okay, I am not, okay. All right, we are missing one. I see Henry's. Yes, Dr. Seidler?
A little question on definitions. So, we list trauma program manager and then pediatric trauma program manager. Most trauma centers are licensed to see all ages. So what do we consider a pediatric trauma program manager other than PCH, which I think is the only state recognized trauma center that only sees kids?
That is a valid point. Thank you, Dr. Zeidler, for bringing that up. It came into my mind because I was specifically in a group where they were a designated facility. However, yes, they can see kids and children patients, but they're often referring them over to PCH anyway. So having that perspective of the pediatric trauma program manager and the inner workings of that, and maybe trying to reduce those transfers, I think could be beneficial for us as well, as a statewide perspective. But I do think maybe it should be more inclusive and broad and just have a trauma program manager in general.
Yeah, I mean, or we just need to further define these definitions of, that a trauma center that sees greater than 50% of age range or something else. And, even I think you deleted, but the pediatric emergency medicine physician can be interpreted differently as well. I see all ages in my general ED. Dale probably sees just the pediatrics, but there are very few places that only have a pediatric ED.
That is valid. Thank you, Dr. Zeidler. I agree that maybe we can broaden these, and when we start letting people know that these roles are open, we'll have that specific criteria.
Perfect.
Thank you. Dr. Woolridge?
Yeah, my brain was in line with Josh's comments. So I think 17 or 18 are very redundant. I mean, you're absolutely right, Abriana, in that once the patient gets into the hospital environment and stabilized, then they can be transferred for specialty care. But since we're focusing on EMS related services, very often it's regional. And Flagstaff, for example, Tucson's a level 2 peds trauma. But Casa Grande, they're receiving the kids as far as the EMS services are concerned. Yes, they're going to be shipped to the larger tertiary centers, but that's a hospital decision. So I would advocate combining or actually removing 18 and just keeping 17. And again, that's my opinion, but I'd love to hear others. But I do see those two as redundant upon each other. Again, and it's all boiling down again back to, we don't want to exclude anybody who wants to actively be involved with PACES. But if we have someone in mind, could they fit either of those roles? Almost like the position at large that Tony's mentioned. We're not a statutory committee. So Gail, Shelley, or Abriana, could we be a little more fluid in this? If we do have someone who fits one role, they can shift to another since we aren't statutory. But again, all being said, 17 and 18 seem awfully redundant to me. I just keep 17 and lose 18.
Yes, Jordana?
Sorry, the ones that have non-voting but are grant required, do they have to be in the bylaws as stating that there's a position for that? Is that why that's like that?
Yeah, that's specifically written in our grant, and it's
Okay.
specific. Yes. Thank you. That was a good question. And just back to sorry, Jordana, do you have something else? I'm so sorry.
No, that's good.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Back to Dr. Woolridge's point, I do agree that 17 and 18 are redundant. I like Tony's suggestion and Dr. Zeidler's about broadening it. So is it okay with the group if I delete 18? Is that okay?
To replace it with an at-large?
Yeah, just leaving
Okay.
17 as the at-large. So that we can open it up to other TPMs.
I'm sorry, clarify. We're deleting 18 and keeping 17?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, but adding an at-large position.
Yeah, I would keep the trauma program. I don't know actually, because I would keep the trauma program manager, but maybe 20 we could leave as an at-large and just do public.
So I don't have a problem with keeping both 18, the 17 and 18, but I would kind of broaden 18 when we have a definition of primarily sees pediatrics or sees more than 30% pediatrics, something to include other hospitals that do see kids other than PCH.
Thank you, Dr. Zeidler. Tony?
Would this be an opportunity for us to use the rural and urban definitions instead of it being, rural for pediatric or for a trauma program manager for 17 and urban for 18, where it's not specific like the pediatric? There are other facilities in case there isn't someone from PCH that's wanting to participate.
I do think that's a good point. I see a lot of thumbs up, which is great. Thank you, guys. I want to circle back to what Dr. Bradley said about, specifying so heavily. And speaking of Dr. Bradley, I'm just going to open the floor.
Yeah, one of the things, and I'll just be totally frank, having seen where we've had challenges, we have had people from very specific hospital systems that have wanted to be on the committees. And many people want to be on these committees because it helps their CV or resume and kind of their promotional process, especially from some academic institutions. The problem is that we've seen many of those people who are actively engaged in other things EMS and pediatrics not participate at all and have an excuse every time we have one of these meetings that are well publicized, in advance. So I just feel like we have to be really cautious when we say, well, we know this facility does a ton of peds. I'm sure they have someone that wants to be on a committee. Again, those people might not actually be the ones that are showing up and participating in the committee. Because that historically has been a big issue that we've had. And we do have a process. We have a letter we're going to be sending out to a member that is going to basically say, you've missed 2 more meetings, but they'll come back and say, I'll be better. I'm going to participate in the next meeting. And so then 4 months later, we see if they participate. And then sometimes they do, and then they drop back off the radar. But it is, it's a volunteer committee. So there's a little bit of decorum that we have at the Bureau, not necessarily quickly evicting people, but also recognizing people tend to have a way of holding on to these positions.
Thank you, Dr. Bradley, for that perspective. Yes, Dr. Woolridge?
Dr. Bradley, if I can ask, because I've been watching the process and we do the attendance. How often do people actually get moved off of a committee based upon poor attendance? I know we have an encouragement. There's a little bit of motivating factor, but as a committee, can we be a little more proactive? Because I feel exactly the same way you do. It's frustrating to you fill a role and then those people are less, involved. And maybe this is a conversation, to have offline. But how readily do people actually move off the committee based upon poor attendance?
I mean, Shelley tracks the numbers, but I think we're sending out 6 letters. Oh, Shelley, go ahead. You've got your hand up. You'll be able to tell that more readily.
Well, it's easier to rescind when they don't respond back. It's easier to rescind if they're tied to a region. So we have the other third party input of, they're not coming to our meetings either. So we are able to rescind.
And that is something I want to bring up when we get to section 2, where it does give people the opportunity. It's you reapply after every 3 years to let us know that you're still interested. And if you're in good standing, then you get to continue. But that is for the next section. So I'll continue to focus on this if that's okay. So I just going off of this, and Dr. Zeidler's suggestion and Tony's, I would say that we potentially remove 18, but make it a specific criteria for that trauma program manager and say, if you see X amount of peds, you can be from a rural or urban facility. And then we have the public body member as well, so that gives opportunity for that rural engagement if we don't necessarily have it compared more towards the urban. Is that okay with the group? Yes, Dr. Woolridge.
If I might, and I'm sorry we're spending so much time on this, keep 17, but 18 we would list it as rural, or the percent. But again, if we don't find the right person who's going to be active, that remains a vacant position, and we still have 17 with the person appointed and present. So finding the right rural trauma program manager, I think, would be a great addition to the committee. I just don't want to be, tied into, if it was vacant, it wouldn't matter to me because we have 17 filled. But if we found the right person as a rural trauma program manager, I think that would be a great representative. So I'd vote to keep 18 and either state rural or, the percent pediatric, trauma program manager.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Woolridge. And then for number 17, would we just leave that for every trauma program manager to join? Is that what your thoughts would be at?
I'm refraining from comment because I want to hear someone else's opinion.
Okay, no worries.
Hey, Brianna, what was your other one that you had there? I'm forgetting now, but it was could you make 17 trauma or pre-hospital program manager. If you wanted to keep that bucket a little broader, but I'm just throwing out ideas. I don't know that role at all. So
No, thank you, Alice. And I had a trauma services outreach coordinator, which it can be a little
you
bit.
had another one that Chris Gilbert was saying are the kind of the roles that have expanded at PCH over the last handful of years.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Allison. I could not hear you.
Oh, sorry. I thought you had another one that was one of the roles that Chris Gilbert had said in the beginning of the call of the roles that have expanded at PCH over the last couple of years.
So that would, I believe what Chris might have been alluding to, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, is maybe the pre-hospital coordinators. They are expanding their reach for their facilities.
Okay.
Yeah, both of those. So that program is expanded again. It's only about 5 to 6 years old, and one individual started it. They have a manager and at least 4 coordinators. They're working on a fifth, starts with a background. And then their trauma program coordinating manager. So with Arrowhead opening, with Avondale opening, and knock on wood, Mercy Gilbert one day opening, they will all have pre-hospital coordinators, trauma program managers. So they went from having 1 to now 4 to 5 in each one of those respective positions.
And just looking in the chat, and thank you, Chris, for that explanation. Anne recommends, could we just say representative from a hospital with a trauma program? And that would make it a little bit broader for who could fill the position. What does the group think about that? Yes, Jordana.
I like the broader term because we are not doing this for individual people. We're doing this as the committee and what we're representing we want. So if we make it broader, I think that way we can, whoever does apply for it, we can make those stipulations of, okay, this one would be beneficial, this one would not because they have more background in peds or whatever.
I'm going to make that edit on 17 and 18.
Thank you. And then maybe when we do the description, we'll say that you have to see X amount of pediatric patients and maybe tailor it more to trauma program managers. But I will save that for another day. Do we agree on 15 and 16, keeping those on from the group?
I like those two.
I do also.
Thank you, Jordana. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Dr. Woolridge. Tony, Dr. Zeidler. Chris. Okay, Tony, yes.
I'm good.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Zeidler.
Yes, good.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, excellent. So 17 and 18 is everyone okay with the broadening terms of that?
What is the difference between 17 and 18 now? They say the same thing.
I think it's more of like the public body sense. So we can have 2 different individuals. So from a rural trauma hospital or an urban trauma hospital to fulfill those roles for 17 and 18.
So we're just saying we want 2 representatives, and we know ideally we would want rural.
Yes.
Okay.
And sorry.
Can we just say urban and rural?
I just think back to Dr. Bradley's point that may be challenging for us to fill.
Sure.
But we could put it in the description. Yes, Tony?
Are we able to be open as it's preferred, but not limited to?
I like that. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Dr. Bradley, is that okay with you?
I would defer to Shelley because I always have Shelley make sure that she keeps us out of trouble with our other committees in terms of verbiage and making sure we have the roles. Because if you don't have any applicant that fits that, then you can end up just having, 2 people from urban trauma centers that provide pediatric care. And if we're okay with that, we get participation, great. But do we need 2 trauma program managers on PACES? I would say that that's pretty heavy participation. Just looking at our other committees and kind of participation on here with the goals. making sure we have enough EMS agency, because I don't view a pre-hospital coordinator as representing EMS. EMS agencies will say that represents the hospital, not the EMS agency or EMS personnel. They're the liaison between, but they're employed by the hospital. They're definitely not an EMS representative. So I just get word we might be getting a little heavy on the hospital side.
I would agree with that. I would like some more EMS representative.
Okay, thank you for that. Because that helped to educate me a little bit. Thank you, Dr. Bradley, because I've always assumed that they worked in tandem with the EMS side.
So may I suggest we combine 17 and 18 and just list the one and remove the rural urban language?
And with that, can we just have like 18 be a, you know, what would you call it? You called it a public something. I'm sorry. Public,
just
open to public. Yeah, just have that so that you can put whoever you want in that position. That way there's not really a definition.
You want EMS?
That works. Okay. Do we want for number, so where is everyone okay with 15 through 19 now? Now that we've worked out, or excuse me, so back to 19. So that's going to be the pediatric pre-hospital coordinator. Yes, Dr. Goldrich.
Well, and I was just going to comment, it's extending off of what Dr. Bradley had said. You know, the pre-hospital coordinator, again, I'm referring to number 19, is a hospital employee and advocate of the hospital's interests. And I see 19 a little redundant on 15 and 16. Or actually, I'm sorry, redundant on 15. So is 19 something that we really want? And again, did we put that in there for an individual, or could that be another at-large position?
Yes, Chris.
One other thing, I guess, when asking about that, because when we look at like a true freestanding pediatric hospital, it really is only Phoenix Children's Hospital. When I go, when we fly into Tucson, where it's a combined, and those pre-hospital coordinators serve for both the adult emergency department and the pediatric emergency department. When I fly to Banner Desert, we have Cardin's. That pre-hospital coordinator covers both Cardin's and Banner Desert ED. When we fly into T-Bird, that pre-hospital coordinator covers both. So by limiting it to just pediatric, are we essentially saying, hey, this is only for Phoenix Children's Hospital? Because there are other pre-hospital coordinators that work at large facilities that have quote unquote pediatric hospitals, Banner Children's, Cardin's, it just feels kind of limiting by saying pediatric pre-hospital coordinator.
Yes, Ann.
And I see Allison's comment where, so we already have 11 says pre-hospital coordinator.
Yeah.
Are we good with just keeping just 11 and not, like Chris just said, not specifying pediatric pre-hospital coordinator?
That's fair with me. If that's fair with the group, I just wanted to present it. And I thank you guys so much for your feedback on this. I would just, is it possible to do it as an at? Okay, so keep 11 and strike 19. Thank you, Tony. So we'll completely strike it out then. Is that what the group wants?
And I guess there's another question. That's the seat that I'm currently serving. I went from an in-hospital based pre-hospital coordinator to an EMS based hospital coordinator. So are we saying 11 has to be hospital based? Because then that would because that changed. Okay, so that could still be EMS based.
Yes. Yeah. That's
okay.
Yeah. I don't know. Okay.
Sorry.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I didn't see all the hands raised. I'm gonna go with Dr. Woolridge first.
Thanks. I see a value in 19. Both ACS and state criteria for pediatric, or I should say, trauma centers, and particularly the level 1 and 2 peds trauma centers. I think it has specific language about a pediatric trauma coordinator. So although the role may be fulfilled by an individual, their pediatric receiving trauma status specifies that they have committed time towards pediatric trauma. So I don't think you have to have a freestanding peds hospital to fill that role. It could be a peds medical center too, right? So level 1 or 2 and trauma designation specifies that. So I still see a value in 19.
So could we pretend, thank you, Dr. Woolridge. I'm sorry, were you still going? I apologize.
19 as the verbiage before, I think it was pediatric pre-hospital. Or I'm sorry, or was it pre-hospital trauma? I'm mixed up now. I apologize.
No, it's okay. It was pediatric pre-hospital coordinator with the intent of it being a hospital-based position. So thank you, Dr. Woolridge. And then Allison, I'm going to kick it over to you.
I just had two clarifying questions. Like, is there someone on PACES right now from PCH? And then is there a value in having specific representation from Phoenix children? Because if so, like, I do think we want to think about that here as well. And if we were going to do the broad buckets, I would almost say, like, if you're really clear that that's where you want the representation from, we do language to something that implies only PCH would fill that role.
Thank you, Allison. So Phoenix Children's is not currently on. And while we recognize they are the only level 1 peds trauma facility, we do have other hospitals that are verified to do pediatrics. So I wanted to be a little bit more broad to have more people with pediatric perspective for the pre-hospital coordinator. Not saying you're not great, Chris, because you are and you came from PCH. But I think having somebody that's currently in that system now and can branch out to the agencies could be beneficial. But Jordana, yes, I'm going to kick it over to you.
So I think it would be beneficial to have a PCH representative, but I also don't want to exclude Banner or Honor Health because they both have pediatric ERs as well. They have like how Thunderbird has and Cardin's has the little separate ER for peds itself. I think it would be very beneficial to have a representative from at least one, if not more than that. So I think having a pediatric ER representation would be beneficial. And a lot of agencies and other hospitals and everybody else always defers to PCH saying, oh, well, PCH can handle this or PCH does this. Maybe it would be best to have somebody from PCH to say, no, we can't do this, or yes, we can do this, to help alleviate some of those issues.
Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate your perspective. And then Tony.
Just want to add, so in the 4 years I've been involved with PACES, between Chris Gilbert and Chris Ramos have been the only representation from PCH that have really been involved in the committee. So they've been amazing, and I don't really expect Chris to sit here and sort of defend himself in that aspect, but I am concerned, again, going back to what Dr. Briley has said about putting something in so specific that we're then excluding these other facilities. And I feel like everyone else has sort of spoken to that a little more articulate. But I want to make sure we're giving credit to Chris and Chris for the work that they have done, and would love to have somebody with that level of involvement open in the, again, but again, concerned about when we're making this limit to such a small facility that they're going to be able to do that.
It's very valid, Tony. Thank you. And yes, Chris is amazing. We're very lucky to have him on PACES. And Dr. Woolridge.
Yeah, just to echo on the same thing regarding Chris. But that being said, that's why I think keeping 19 and keeping 11, I think fulfills that role. I mean, we have an active person who's in the position, and I think we can see it from the, the coordinator side, whether they're a freestanding children's hospital, a children's medical center, or a center that's generalized and seeing all ages in one setting. We can still have that pre-hospital coordinator involved, and we have 15 and 16, which are our PACs too, right? So I think having those two, works. and to be inclusive, I think, which is what I'm hearing from everybody.
And I wholeheartedly agree with that. While when I took over the pre-hospital coordinator position at PCH, Chris sat me down and explained to me how important it was to be involved at the state level, that to make change in the pre-hospital care world, that this is a great place and to be and to impact change. And so that is why I've tried to stay active, but it's also when I was in that position was trying to actively bring other members in, saying, look, you don't have to be there, like injury prevention. He was asking me, he's a former police officer. He's like, oh, I'd love to be a part of something like that. I was like, well, they're open public meetings. You can't participate, send the link. And so there were opportunities for them to participate along the way too. So I think by narrowing it down, narrowing that pool, by leaving it open, leaving it broad, it's going to bring someone that, while they may not be at the state's only level 1 trauma center, they're seeing a lot of pediatric patients. They can be involved. PCH does go to other meetings where these pre-hospital coordinators that could potentially sit on this board, they will get that information. They'll be able to pass that along. They work with them. We do a lot of in conjunction training with PCH where you're getting that exposure. But I agree. There's opportunities to participate at the public level where maybe you're not voting, but there could have been participation. So it shows the want, I guess, kind of putting it bluntly.
This is excellent. Thank you, Chris, for that as well. You've brought a lot of people to us, so we're very grateful for that. So do we want to remove the pediatric portion of it or just and leave it as pre-hospital hospital coordinator so it's more inclusive of the other hospitals that have receiving pediatric patients? Or
I don't feel strongly unless someone else does.
Can you tie it to like a visit per year? I mean, if we look at how many, I don't have the numbers right off my hand, but how many pediatric patients, obviously I know PCHs, but how many does Banner Children's, Banner Cardin see Honor Health? Because obviously it would be a lot different if we get a pre-hospital coordinator from like a freestanding hospital in Maricopa, obviously. So if we can tie it to a visit per year or something like that, I think it could be, maybe that helps.
yeah, that's a good point. So maybe keeping that more inclusive in the description when we're looking for that position. Is that what I'm understanding, Chris?
Yeah, like a pre-hospital coordinator in an emergency department that sees, it's an arbitrary number, but 5,000 to 10,000 kids, or at a minimum 5,000 kids a year. That way they have some data to draw from. They have interactions with the EMS agencies that work with pediatric patients. That it's just an idea. I'm trying to find a way to make it more inclusive, but also still have that experience of pediatric, seeing pediatric patients.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, Dr. Woolridge?
Yeah, and maybe a little bit of background, Chris. You know, when we get someone who would like to be on the committee and would like to fulfill that position, we will vet their application. They have a CV, their location, their current job position. We do look at all those elements, and it's a component of that review prior to appointment. And then Dr. Bradley can say more about or Shelley can say more about the internal processing through the Bureau. But all being said, that is taken into consideration. I will throw out there just a little comment that having been involved with this for a long time and been involved with the designation programs, I am always impressed about the rural centers who don't have the resources, who don't have the numbers, yet they still have the capacity of being prepared. So I do think those individuals that may not necessarily have the numbers but have passion or can be actively involved would still be a good committee member. So, I mean, I see your point, Chris, but we do vet their applications in advance, for sure.
Gotcha, yeah, that makes sense.
So I would maybe propose just removing the pediatric and leaving it pre-hospital for an AD coordinator. And would that work for the group? So it's a little bit more broad.
And then that leaves a hospital-based pre-hospital coordinator and an EMS-based hospital pre-coordinator?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
So I'm going to just, while we're on the call, because we're all, thank you, Shelley. I was going to actually just put that in. Thank you for number 11. Okay, so number 20 and number 21, based on our discussion today, I believe it would be better to have it be an at-large representative. Is that okay with the group? And I know with state officials, we don't want them to be voting.
You want EMS or hospital assigned?
Is it possible for the group to consider an education representative? That could be a school nurse or, yes, Dr. Woolridge?
I think it would be a huge asset to have someone from the Department of Education and or, a school nurse or someone from the education perspective. But, there is such a segregation between healthcare and the school setting versus EMS. They have a school nurse that responds to the principal as their boss. And they call EMS to do services within the school setting. I think there are projects that we would have going forward that we really need to reach out to those individuals, but to actually have them be a voting member, I don't necessarily see how the two blend. It's at least as far as, emergency services for a community. So I would vote to make it a public member.
Thank you, Dr. Woolridge, and thank you, Anne, for your comment in the chat. Yes, Tony?
If we look back at the mission that you had showed us in the beginning, those two lines, talk about access to emergency care, with going back to the kids with special needs. I don't feel that the education department really ties back to that mission. I think there's huge value to that, but for them to be on the board as a voting member, I feel like that actually goes against what we're actually trying to do.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. So I would just say that in Dr. Woolridge's recommendation, we leave it as a public member. That way it's more inclusive and we can vet that person when they start submitting applications. Is that something that we're all okay with? I see yes, a nod from Tony. Nod from Dr. Woolridge. Excellent. And then a thumbs up from Anne. Dr. Zeidler and Chris, are you okay with that? Jordana as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you all. Okay. And then 21, this individual was actually introduced for me from a current PACES committee member for emergency physician representation for tribal communities. Is this something that we want to consider having on our committee, or do we want to open it to public member?
I think I would probably do the public member portion of it, like how Dr. Bradley was saying, it's very difficult to find representation. Just to have it kind of be open so we can fill that and not be pigeonholed into just a tribal person and not have it filled.
Yes, Dr. Woolridge.
I sorry, I didn't see who was just spoke, but I agree in that line. Tribal may pigeonhole us a bit. But all being said, we have a number of facilities that receive either EMS transport or trauma from native lands. Flagstaff is surrounded by native lands, Kingman, I mean, I can name a bunch even down here in Tucson. So maybe this one can boil to, that percent volume or servicing tribal areas. But I do see there's, unique services or maybe even should say lack of services in tribal lands that I think a person who represents that issue would be a benefit, but maybe altering the verbiage.
I just saw in that chat too, a representative from a tribal community was just, I'm sorry, I didn't see who put it in there, but I think that to echo what Dr. Woolridge is saying now, I fly in that area, sales and to San Carlos and these areas, and having representation. They have some extremely unique needs, especially children on the res. So I think that if it's someone from tribal, I think it would be fantastic because these tribal nations are still following the EMS guidelines for the state. So I think it could be very valuable to have someone, but I also see the argument it can be tough to get that person. So I support trying to make it someone from tribal.
Yeah, I really appreciate Anne's recommendation and Chris, your feedback and insight, as well as Dr. Woolridge. I know from my meetings that there are people that are very interested. I can already think of 3 that would be able to fulfill this role, not being now an emergency physician. So are we okay to all say yes to 21? Okay, awesome. Okay, wow. Thank you guys. And we already discussed 22. If it's a children and youth with special health care needs liaison, it's not specific to ADHS, so it would be transitioned to a voting position. Are we okay with that? And this one would have to be more targeted. Yes, Anne?
So right now we have children and youth with special health care needs liaison, and we're saying that liaison means it could be anyone, it can be another agency, it can be a family member, it can be.
Yes, that's correct. The current one that serves in a different bureau is a contractor, so they're not specifically a state employee. And it could be a family member as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I would vote to keep 22.
Same.
I got 3. Dr. Zeidler? Jordana?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. I can only see so many, so I apologize if I'm missing anyone. We are 7 minutes out from our conclusion of meeting, so I just want to confirm everyone's okay with 16 through 22. Or, excuse me, 15 through 22. Okay.
That's an even number. You had told us we were going to need an odd number.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking at. So I don't know if we should remove number 20 as a public member. That way it makes it more easy for quorum. Yes, Dr. Woolridge, and then I'll move it to 20.
Can we just add another public member? Again, we like flexibility of being able to find the active participant. That would give us an extra slot to fill if we had someone who didn't necessarily dovetail into any one of the defined positions.
That is a good point. I'm going to move it over to Tony and then see everyone's thoughts on what Dr. Woolridge recommends.
For quorum, we need 50% plus 1. So if we're at 22, we would need 11 plus 1 for 12. Why do we need an odd number? Is it just for tiebreaker of votes in case we come down to 11 and 11 and are stalled?
Shelly, I'm going to move that over to you. Tony may have just admitted I'm really bad at math. So
yeah, we don't need an odd number. It's whatever number you want for membership. Because quorum is 50% plus 1.
My apologies, everyone. When I was doing the list, it was showing a half person, so I thought it was a little bit difficult, but yeah, so are we okay with this set of numbers then? Okay. Awesome. Okay, so section 2, I didn't get a lot of kickback from this. This was just to reinstate that you would reapply after your 3 years to let us know that you're still interested. Instead of having a specific term of membership, it would be 3 years, and then on good standing, you can serve again. Is that okay with the group?
So I'm lost here. What's the change?
So the change, it was originally in the bylaws that there was no specific term of membership.
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
I definitely think a term's a good idea, because otherwise you get some stagnation.
Okay. I see. Anne approved, Dr. Zeidler, Tony. Dr. Woolridge, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Jordana?
Yeah, I like it.
Anne, are you okay with that?
Yes.
Thank you, Anne. Awesome. Okay, so I think we're going to have to table this, but I want to introduce the proxy voting. Dr. Bradley mentioned that historically this has not been done before. Shelly, do you want to provide a little insight into this?
As Dr. Bradley said, none of the other committees that we have support proxy voting. Robert's rules does not support proxy voting. However, if it's in your bylaws, you can have it. So I'm thinking, I'm not sure who's needing proxy voting, but we kind of wordsmith this part to have it reflect the chair of the standing committee may allow a proxy to vote or otherwise act for the appointed board member. The proxy will not count for member attendance, but will count for quorum for member voting. A board member may submit in writing a proxy request to the chair and EMSC grant manager between 7 and 30 days before a meeting. So at least a week's notice. Proxy requests expire after each meeting. The chair and vice chair shall not appoint a proxy to vote on their behalf. And then a proxy request is effective when received and acknowledged by the chair and EMSC grant manager. During the meeting roll call, the assigned proxy will respond, Shelley Bissell for Julia Vinton, for an example. So I'm not sure if you're happy with how that drafted out, but that's what we came up with if we want to experiment with having proxies on PACES.
Thank you, Shelley. Dr. Woolrich?
I mean, having proxy voting kind of defeats the purpose of us being diligent at appointing our board members. I mean, we want these representatives. We're eyeing for active participation. Allowing proxy, I think, just circumvents that. I personally, and I don't want to, put anybody in a position, but does anyone here really want proxy voting? I mean,
that was me. This is Anne. I think I was the one that brought it up. I think from my position, right, I'm representing AZAP and the PPEC program, right? And the PPEC program has a lot of influence over the care of children in the emergency department. And so the issue that I had with no proxy voting is that means that the voice and the vote of AZAP and the PPEC program are dependent on Ann Stafford's vacation schedule, right? So if I'm on vacation or if I'm traveling and I can't be at the meeting, then AZAP and PPEC don't get a vote. Does that make sense? Like every time I miss a meeting, I feel tremendously guilty that voice is not being counted in the vote.
Thank you, Anne. And Anne was not the only one to share. There was an additional member that also has a broad net over pediatric care that has shared same sentiments. And Tony, I'll kick it over to you.
I cannot recall the last time we actually had something come before the board that we really voted something down. Is there an opportunity for a position from Anne to be presented or be read in her absence? Being involved in other boards that have proxy members, it creates a lot more confusion about what's actually happening instead of it just being clean that someone's there to vote. It seems like there's a lot more questions and a lot more dialogue. I'm also acknowledging that those other associations don't necessarily have where that proxy expires after one meeting. So the experience that I've had is these proxies show up historically for years in that person's absence.
We could adjust the language to say Anne could assign another board member to vote for her and be a proxy in that way.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the entire list from the top. I mean, we have organizations represented in a number of these. Number 5 names: Ames, Wacom, SAMES, Arizona AAP, Arizona ASAP. Do we alter the language? And I totally appreciate what you're saying. I'm just wondering how we can do this without driving Brianna and Shelley crazy when it comes to taking votes. I mean, is it altering the language? I know we're running over time here, but maybe we do need to shelf this one because I definitely see your point, Anne.
Yeah, maybe we can come back to it the next meeting because I think it was Tony that said earlier that if I can have a representative come and state our position, right? Not necessarily vote. Maybe that would be sufficient, but if it's all right, can we think about this a little bit more and come back to it? Does a decision have to be made today?
No, a decision does not have to be made as long as we had some conversation. So we can either establish another work group, or if we want to wait until the next PACES meeting and revisit this proxy topic, then I'll leave that up to you all.
Oh, well, I guess what does everyone else think? Because I'm the one that's asking for it.
Maybe because Dr. Bradley is very involved in this conversation as well. Maybe it would be best to wait till PACES to have this discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, Brianna, for interrupting. Maybe the solution again, maybe, we have this conversation, because we're over time, but in the future, but maybe the solution, as Chris, I think it was Chris who brought up that, we really haven't voted anything down or I think done anything that would necessarily be detrimental. But if there was your absence, for example, and it directly impacted the designation program, that it's shelved until, and that there's no action taken, maybe that might be the solution, that there would be a shelving of a voting item in your absence, i.e. you could see the agenda in advance and say, hey, I can't go to this one. Can we hold this one for our next meeting? Again, those are gotta be pretty rare events, but I'm sure there's a way around this. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I like that idea.
I would almost challenge that idea, Anne, because I know we're gonna be ramping up pretty quickly in 2026, just with our assessments and such. That the PPEC program is going to have a lot of attention in the upcoming years that may need votes. So
we need more time to discuss it.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you all for coming. So we'll wait and table this till PACES, or do we want to do a work group? Dr. Woolridge, I'll leave that decision to you.
I think we have consensus with those in attendance at this point with, I'm sorry, for proxy?
Yes.
Oh, I would be more than happy to have another work group put together before our next PACES meeting, which is March 20th.
Okay, excellent. Is that okay with the remaining individuals on the call?
Yes, I think a work group would be good.
Awesome. Tony, I saw a nod, and I see a nod. Dr. Zeidler. Yes. Okay, awesome. Well, Shelley, we will coordinate that on our behalf and start sending dates out. Does that work?
Yeah, you can ask Dr. Woolridge for his dates.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for your contributions today and active discussion. This was really excellent to do with you all today. Thank you for your time, and I will create another work group to discuss proxy voting.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Brianna, for coordinating us.